Minnesota's defense might be a whole lot better than anybody outside of Minneapolis even realizes right now. And I know what you're thinking. It's only August. I get that. Everybody loves their team in August. Everyone's undefeated. Every young player is supposedly going to break out. Every veteran looks better than they ever have. Every position group is somehow deeper than it was a year ago. Everybody says, oh, we were a better team than we were last year. But this is not just like one camp quote or something. This is not just one player. Minnesota has had a wave of good news hit the defense from about 5 different directions at once since fall camp is open. And when you put all of it together, I think the Gophers could have one of the most annoying front sevens to play against in the entire Big Ten. So in this episode of the Big Ten Huddle presented to you by FanDuel, let me give you exactly what is changing, because the biggest development might not even be the obvious one. It might be something entirely different. So let's start with the obvious one of it all, right? Anthony Smith is back, and that alone is completely massive. The things he's doing in camp right now, from everything everybody's saying, is phenomenal. Smith led the Big Ten with 12.5 sacks last season. He's now within striking distance of Minnesota's career sack record. This is also a player who apparently had another NIL opportunity available to him, but chose to stay at Minnesota because he wanted to be with his team and believed in what they could accomplish. And also, PJ Fleck just keeps his dudes. PJ Fleck knows how to keep the guys he wants to keep, and Anthony Smith was one of the ones he wanted to keep. That's the first piece of good news. Your best pass rusher did not leave. He's back. But here's where it gets even more fun, right? Minnesota did not just retain Smith. They retained almost everybody around him. Carter Menz had 6.5 sacks last season. Jackson Howard had 4. Minnesota added TJ Bush, who had 5.5 sacks last year at Cal after also recording 5.5 the year before I think it was at Liberty before that. So between Smith, Menz, Bush, Howard, I think that's all I got there. Minnesota has 4 edge players who combined for more than 25 sacks last year. Think about this for a second. I mean, not 25 pressures, not 25 theoretical, sacks based on recruiting rankings or anything like that. More than 25 actual sacks. Listen, this is where Minnesota could become miserable for teams to play against, and they might not even see it coming, because offensive lines can game plan for one elite pass rusher, like Anthony Smith, if he's coming, fine, but slide the protection his way and try to protect against him, chip him with a tight end, or have the running back help against them. Whatever you have to do, try that. But what happens from there is that on the other side, or maybe next to him or something like that, that's when Carter Menz is sitting on the other side, and he is going to be a threat against you. What happens when TJ Bush rotates in with fresh legs? What happens when Jackson Howard is your 4th option instead of somebody you are praying can survive 15 snaps? I mean, that changes things, and that was a lot of stuff that changed things against Nebraska when they had all the sacks against them, too. Now, Nebraska's offensive line, we'll just be honest, they sucked last season. But it was also Minnesota being really good and Danny Collins being able to take advantage of opportunities. It's almost like having a pitching staff where you do not need the starter throwing 9 innings. Minnesota can keep throwing fresh arms in there. And in the 4th quarter, when your offensive tackle has been 50, 60 snaps deep into the game and Anthony Smith, gets a breather, here comes another guy who's already proven he can get to quarterbacks too. Now, is he Anthony Smith? No, of course not. Anthony Smith is a really good player. He's the best pass rusher on this team. But these other guys are good too. That's good news for this team. But the second piece might matter just as much. Minnesota has the veteran in the middle to make things work. Maverick Baranowski is back after putting together a 103 tackle season. Baranowski has a quick trigger. He is excellent at getting into the backfield. He's confident. He plays with a lot of aggression. He also had 3 sacks and a forced fumble, and he played 667 defensive snaps last year. Only Coy Parrish and Anthony Smith played more than that on the Minnesota defense. That's not just production. That's stability. That's reliability. I mean, that's whatever other ability you want to put in there, because there is one major question on this Minnesota defense, and we're going to get to it. The interior defensive line is replacing a ton. So if you're going to have new faces playing directly in front of your linebackers, having a guy like Maverick Baranowski, not Marvin, Maverick Baranowski behind them really does matter. He has seen it. He knows where he's supposed to be. He can diagnose things. He can clean up mistakes. And he can be that coach behind the players to get them spotted up right, to get them in the right positions. And that means Minnesota does not need every new defensive tackle to immediately become a star, to become an anchor of the team. They need to get those guys to do their jobs, obviously. Sid Cada, some of those other guys, blanking off the top of my head some of the other ones. I think I might have them on the screen here next to me. But those are playmakers that could be around them and help them. And one of those playmakers could be Emmanuel Carmo. This might be my favorite part of the whole story. I talked about Carmo before last season. He only played 156 snaps as a true freshman, so it was probably a little premature. I get that. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's already become a Big Ten, all Big Ten linebacker or anything like that. We've not seen enough yet, but the flashes, those are there. Those were interesting last season. He showed a lot of athleticism. The ability to cover is there. He can potentially play Sam linebacker. He can be used off the edge. He can move around. He is somebody that Minnesota fans I know are very excited about and should be very excited about. The hometown kid going to have possibly a really good season for Minnesota this year. And that opens up something Minnesota could not necessarily do if Carmo were just another traditional linebacker. Imagine 3rd and 8. Anthony Smith is standing over here. Carter Menz is on the other side. Baranowski is inside, and Carmo walks toward the line of scrimmage. And guess what? Everybody's thinking about Baranowski. Everybody's thinking about Anthony Smith. Everybody's thinking about Carter Menz. Now what? Is Carmo coming? Is Baranowski coming? Carmo dropping, back into coverage? Is Minnesota bringing 3, 4, 5, 6? Who's coming after him? Who does the running back have to stop and get? Who does the tight end think, ooh, I better chip this guy because they're going to be bringing pressure and I got to help out my offensive line? That is how you create hesitation. And hesitation against the edge room could be deadly. But now we get the biggest question, right? Because everybody I just told you about sounds fantastic until somebody runs the ball directly at Minnesota. The defensive tackle room has to prove itself. Minnesota lost Devin Easter, Jalen Logan Redding, Nate Becker, Rushan Lawrence. Like those 4 guys accounted for the overwhelming majority of Minnesota's defensive tackle snaps last year. I don't think I was missing anybody there. I think I got all 4 guys that were pretty much there. That is significant turnover. You cannot pretend otherwise. Losing those guys does matter, and this is where this wave of good news gets really interesting because there are starting to be some encouraging answers here as well. Nequan Crowder, I think that's how, yeah, there it is at the bottom. Nequan Crowder looks like the veteran piece Minnesota can lean on. He had 26 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack, and a forced fumble at Marshall. But the number I really care about is his run defensive grade. Let me look that up for you guys on his PFF here. Nequan Crowder, his run defensive grade. There we go. Will come up here. That is exactly the type of player Minnesota needs in the middle of their team. It says passing depth. That's why. This is exactly the type of player Minnesota needs. They do not need Crowder chasing 20 sacks, plug the run, keep offensive linemen from climbing freely to Baranowski. That's the kind of stuff they need. Plug the run. Force offenses into 3rd and long, then let the monsters off the edge eat. And behind Crowder, 2 names become really important. Riley Sundrum and Jalen Hicks. Both are entering year 3. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because defensive coordinator Danny Collins has talked about how he generally does not expect high school offensive or defensive linemen to be significant contributors until about year 3 in the program, which makes sense. Your body has to develop. You have to get yourself more ready, and that's, the 5-for-5 rules is going to help Danny Collins be able to do that more. They have to add strength. They have to develop physically. They have to learn the system. They have to adjust to playing against grown men every Saturday. Well, year 3's here. I don't know how else to say it. Like, clock's up. Here it is. And that's either one of 2 things. That's either, yes, time is here, or, oh no, clock is up. I better get ready. But that makes Sundrum and Hicks 2 of the biggest swing players on Minnesota's entire defense. If those 2 are ready, suddenly this defensive tackle situation does not look nearly as scary. And then there is Howie Johnson. Let me bring him up here as well. You have Howie Johnson as well as somebody that you can talk about in this entire situation too. This is the one that really caught my attention because normally, based on everything we just talked about, Minnesota is willing to be patient with young defensive linemen. I mean, see, we don't even have anything here on the defensive side. Let's see, we have some snaps. Nope, no snaps, right? Develop them, get them stronger. Do not rush them. But, PJ Fleck has already specifically mentioned Howie Johnson as a true freshman he expects and could help Minnesota this season. That matters. No production. Nothing here on the PFF side. That matters. Johnson arrived after producing 88 tackles for loss, 22 sacks, and more than 230 tackles during his high school career. And he's already around 300 pounds. Now, does that mean that Minnesota should expect him to play, 50 snaps against Ohio State? No. Please do not put that on the true freshman, on the kid. Like, nobody is expecting him to do that. But if he can get Minnesota 10 good snaps here and there, 15 maybe by the end of the year, help keep the veteran defensive tackles fresh, not be a liability when he goes in, but be somebody who can just kind of keep it steady, keep things going. Or, maybe he could really turn into something, who knows. That becomes another piece they can use. And Fleck has earned a little, or at least a little benefit of the doubt when he publicly identifies freshmen who may be ready early on. Darius Taylor got that kind of praise. He played early. Greg Johnson got that opportunity. Emmanuel Carmo played as a freshman. Like I said, over 150 snaps for him. So Howie Johnson becomes a name worth remembering. And that is when you zoom out and realize that what has actually happened here, right? How many snaps is Howie Johnson going to play this year? With Anthony Smith staying, Carter Menz is back, Jackson Howard is back, TJ Bush arrives with some really nice proven production. Maverick Baranowski returns after 103 tackles last season. Emmanuel Carmo could become a movable weapon for the defensive system. Crowder gives Minnesota a proven run defender inside, and Sundrum and Hicks, they have reached that developmental year where Minnesota is starting to expect the production. Make it happen. Expect it. And Howie Johnson may already be pushing this way into the rotation. That is not one piece of good news. That is an absolute stack of good news. Let me get a drink really fast. Mouth dries out if I don't get a drink. Now, here's the reality check, okay? FanDuel currently has Minnesota down to 6.5 win total, and they are favored to go under that win total at minus 160. Now, if you know Minnesota's history with the win total and how they go over it, then that's not a very smart bet. But that's what they got favored, so that's what they're trying to entice people, or that's what they're trying to not entice people to do. So nobody nationally is looking at Minnesota and thinking they're going to be relevant of anything more than a bowl game this season. But Minnesota does not need to be Ohio State. They don't need to be a national championship contender. They do need 15 They do not need, 15 future first-round picks. They just need an identity. And this defense is starting to look like it could have one. Pressure the quarterback, rotate bodies, make offenses earn everything, get you into 3rd and long, then let Anthony Smith and company come hunting in the backfield. That is the recipe for running or ruining somebody's Saturday. And if the defensive tackles answer the one majority question we still have, then this stops being just a nice Minnesota defense and just, another thing that Danny Collins and PJ Fleck put together. Oh, it's a good defense this year. Then it becomes the kind of defense where you look up in October and realize the Gophers are hanging around in games nobody expected them to. Not because they're scoring 50, but because the other team cannot get comfortable, and Drake Lindsay has a bunch of friends on the other side of the ball helping him out. And that is the real reason we have a wave of good news. Every individual development makes the next one more valuable. Anthony Smith, more dangerous because of Minnesota's depth around him. The edge depth is more dangerous because Baranowski can stabilize the middle of the field. Baranowski is more dangerous if Crowder, Sundrum, and Hicks can keep blockers off of them, and the entire front becomes harder to diagnose if Carmo gives Minnesota another movable piece. It all connects. Minnesota still has to prove it. We are not crowning them anything yet. We're just saying good news, optimistic viewing, stuff like that. The defensive tackles still have to deliver. The young players still have to become real Saturday contributions. But if those pieces hit, if it all works out together, this front seven could be one of the biggest reasons Minnesota becomes a much tougher team than people are expecting in 2026, and they keep it going with going the over on their win total, making them one of the most severely underrated teams going into every season. So Gopher fans, I want to know, which piece of this Minnesota defense are you most excited about? Is it the edge rushers? Is it Baranowski and the linebackers, or the young defensive tackles? Drop it in the comments. And before you get out of here, like the video, subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle for more football and basketball analysis, and join us over here at the Big Ten Huddle on Saturday and Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Me and Zach talking about Big Ten football, chopping it up, talking about it. We'd love to have you here with us. So thanks for watching. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time.